Hello students, welcome to Model 2 Unit 3. My name is Mauli Tofa, a film sound engineer and sound mixer, and today we are going to talk about diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. Diegetic sound exists in the story or the scene as you see it. It originates from the scene. So for instance, dialogue from the character is considered diegetic. Sound that you hear being made by the character is diegetic, and it helps support the story. But with non-diegetic sound, it helps build what the audience see. So non-diegetic sound could be music score, dramatic sound effects. Those help build the audience's interpretation of the plot or the story. You could hear a ticking clock in the background, which is part of the scene. In that sense, you're seeing the clock. But with non-diegetic sounds, there are sounds that help interpret the plot for the audience. Sounds like music score and sound effects to help the audience interpret the plot. Imagine somebody walking in a dark alley. You hear their footsteps walking, and then you hear an eerie sound behind them. It creates the suspense or surprise. For example, you see in a horror movie, somebody is walking somewhere or walking in a forest. Then all of a sudden, there's a weird sound the person hears that affects the mood of the audience. Let's talk about how diegetic and non-diegetic sound interacts with the character development. First of all, let's look at diegetic sound. When we talk about diegetic sound, let's make reference to dialogue. Dialogue emanates from the character within the story. It shows you the state of mind of the character. Secondly, look at sound effects. Sound effects in this case, we are looking at sound created by the character in the story or around the character. A ticking clock is a sound effect, but it is diegetic because you can see the clock. The footsteps of the character or the character tapping their hands on their thighs becomes a sound effect which is diegetic. Thirdly, we talk about the ambience of the scene. Ambient sound of a scene helps the viewers and the character relate to a scene. So for instance, you see a scene with two lovers kissing and there's music in the background, but yet you see the source of the music. It could be from a CD player or a TV. That is ambient sound, and that helps with the character development. There's an interaction between the ambient sound and the character. Non-diegetic sound deepens emotional and psychological mood of the scene. How does it do that? It helps create an emotional context to shape the understanding of the scene by the audience. So let's look at the non-diegetic sound elements, or what we consider non-diegetic sound, and how they affect what the audience see. We are looking at music score, dramatic sound effects, and voiceover. Music score can be used to highlight the character's thoughts, which probably are not stated or visible in the scene. So for example, every time a character appears on the screen, certain music is associated with that character. In that case, there's a recurring theme of music you hear, and that you associate with the character. Now let's talk about voiceovers. Voiceovers offer the audience direct access to the character's thoughts in the scene. For instance, you hear a voiceover of the character of what they are thinking, or in a flashback, whatever you hear could be a voiceover of somebody narrating their story. So in that case, it gives you access as the audience into the thought of the character on the screen. Unlike the linear narrative structure, which follows a chronological order, the non-linear structure doesn't follow any order. So that you could be watching a movie or a scene, it goes into a flashback, it goes to a flash forward, comes back to the current situation. Now, sound design or non-diegetic sounds also help in creating that feel where you experience a character, you see them, there's a voiceover of what happened in the past, and then you come back and you're thinking about what might happen. Let's say you're talking to a lady. Before you express your words, you're thinking, what if she rejects me? What will happen if she rejects me? Or am I going to say the right thing? What if I say it this way? Is it right or not? Some of the techniques used in blending diegetic and non-diegetic sound to create a more immense cinematic experience. One, trans-diegetic sound. Now, when I talk about trans-diegetic sound, we could talk about the use of diegetic sound which transitions smoothly into non-diegetic sound. So, for instance, in a scene, there's a character playing the piano. And then in that same scene, the sound transitions from the character playing the piano to a full orchestra that the audience will hear. That's a smooth transition from diegetic to non-diegetic. Two, you can look at a transition from non-diegetic to diegetic. So, for instance, you could hear a musical score, but then it brings you to a scene where you can see a performance going on. In that case, the audience are left to decide where the sound sits. Trans-diegetic sound is a technique used in filmmaking, and it helps transition what the audience see or understand in relation to what is happening in the story. In summary, today we've spoken about diegetic and non-diegetic sound, what diegetic sound is, what non-diegetic sound is, the effect or the role it plays in the narrative or the story. And then we've also spoken about how you can play or create the narrative character by using both diegetic and non-diegetic sound. How you can play on, or how you can help the audience also understand the story by using diegetic and non-diegetic sound, either one at a time or transitioning from one to the other. Thank you for joining the class. Until next time, it's bye.